The Raven's Rest drifted mid-route. Its engines cycled with a low, uneven hum. Freya Colm leaned over a communications console. Her jaw was set. The console glowed with a single image. The image showed a station. It was built by a species called the Korth. The station floated at the edge of a dense nebula. The nebula was known as Celeste Deep. She glared at the screen. "I don't care about your tariff schedules." Her voice cut through the silence. "I need transit through the Sybil Nebula, 3 standard days, no cargo, just passage." The Korth negotiator on the screen did not blink. It had no eyes. Its face was a plane of faceted silica. Its voice vibrated through the speakers. "You have nothing we require," the Korth stated. Its name was Kaelin. It had told her that twice already. "Your hull is obsolete. Your fuel reserves are depleted. Your credit line expired 40 cycles ago." Freya's knuckles went white on the edge of the console. Behind her, the crew compartment was dim and cramped. Lion sat at the navigation station. She was a young woman with shadows under her eyes. Soren worked in the med bay. He had not shaved in a week. They were both running on fumes and bad coffee. "I have salvage rights to a debris field near the nebula's edge," Freya offered. "You can take 17% of the haul." Kaelin's form shifted. Crystal facets rotated in sequence. It considered, then it refracted. 17% is insufficient. Your debris field has no confirmed value. The Korth Collective does not gamble on speculation. Freya opened her mouth. She closed it. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell Kaelin that its whole species was built from rock and bad negotiation tactics. But she knew the Korth. They only understood transactions. They had no emotion, no empathy, just assessments and outcomes. The ship hummed a different hum. The long-range sensor array pinged. Lion's head snapped up. "Freya, I have something." Freya held up a hand to Kaelin. The Korth negotiator waited in silence. It was patient. It was stone. "What kind of something?" Freya demanded. Lion worked her console. Her fingers moved fast. "Unknown, it is not Korth, not Nebulith, not any registry I recognize." Freya walked over. She stood behind Lion's chair and stared at the display. A signal, it was faint. The carrier wave was old. The encryption was layered so deep it looked like noise, a garbled pulse in the dark. "How old?" Freya asked. Lion ran the calculation. Her face went pale. "At least 15,000 cycles, maybe older." Freya felt something cold settle in her chest. There was nothing in this sector that old. The Korth had been here for 6,000 cycles. The Ethon had passed through twice in recorded history. The root mind had never left its home world. This signal was alien, truly alien. "Can you decode it?" she pressed. Lion shook her head. "Not without burning the processor. The encryption is not designed for any system we have. It is self-corrupting. The waveform is decaying in real time." Soren stepped out of the med bay. He dried his hands on his pants and looked at the display. "That is a distress beacon," he said. Freya turned. "How do you know?" Soren pointed at the waveform. "See the repetition interval, 3 pulses, a pause, 3 pulses. It is a standard emergency pattern. The modulation is primitive, but the structure is clear." Freya looked at the signal. She made a decision. "Lion, plot an intercept course, full burn." Lion stared at her. "That will drain the last of our fuel. We will not have enough to reach Celeste Deep." "I know." "Freya, we are 6 months overdue for resupply. The ship is running on patchwork and spare wiring." "I know." "If we burn the fuel for this, we cannot make any other destination. This signal is the only stop." Freya met her eyes. "Then it is our only stop." Comms crackled. Kaelin's voice vibrated through the speaker. "Salvage operator, you are vectoring toward restricted collective space. Your trajectory violates transit code 734B. Acknowledge." Freya walked back to the panel. She looked at the Korth negotiator. Its crystalline face caught the light of the station behind it. Cold, perfect, indifferent. "Kaelin," she said, "file a complaint." She cut the channel. The engines roared. The ship lurched forward. Acceleration pressed Freya into her seat. The Raven's Rest burned hard into the dark. The trip took 12 hours. They had no fuel for course correction, no margin for error, just a straight line into the signal's source. Freya did not sleep. She stood at the viewport and watched the stars drift past. Lion navigated by instinct and guesswork. The signal's origin point was moving, not drifting, orbiting. "There is a gravity well ahead," Lion reported. Weak, no stellar mass, no planetary bodies. A rogue planet, Freya guessed. No, too small. It is a single object, very dense. It has a stable orbit around the galactic center, but it has no sun. Freya frowned. What is it orbiting? Nothing, it is alone. The signal grew stronger. The carrier wave stabilized as they approached. The encryption still held, but the pulses were clear now. 3 bursts, a pause, 3 bursts. Soren stood beside Freya at the viewport. He had cleaned the med bay twice. He was nervous, they all were. "We should be careful," he murmured. "We are careful," Freya replied. "We are broke and desperate. That is not the same as careful." Freya did not answer. The ship emerged from the nebula's edge. The viewport went dark, the stars vanished. There was nothing ahead, no light, no planets, no sun. Just a single structure at the center of the gravity well. It was huge, it was dark. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The shape was wrong. It had angles that did not align with geometry Freya recognized, edges that bent toward each other in ways that hurt to follow. "That is not natural," Lion whispered. "No," Freya agreed, "it is not." The signal's origin point was inside the structure. The navigation computer confirmed it. The carrier wave died at the structure's surface and regenerated from within. Soren touched Freya's arm. "This is above our pay grade, we should leave." "We have no fuel to leave," Freya said. "Then we have a problem." Freya stared at the structure. It did not move. It did not react. It simply existed, a silent monument in the void. "We go in," she decided. Lion navigated the ship toward the structure's surface. There was no docking port, no landing bay, just a seam in the material, a line where the angles shifted. The ship matched velocity. The seam opened. It did not hiss, it did not grind, it just parted, like a wound opening without pain. Freya took a deep breath. She grabbed her helmet, she checked the seals. She grabbed a hand light and a tool kit. Lion stayed at the console. Soren followed Freya to the airlock. "You do not have to come," Freya said. "Yes, I do," Soren countered. "You bleed, I stitch, that is the deal." Freya nodded. They cycled the airlock. The outer door opened. The void beyond had edges. The resonance chamber hummed. The hum carried the weight of 1,000 crystalline voices. Kalen stood at the center of the hub. His form shifted through shades of indigo and violet. Each color carried meaning. Each tone shaped the debate. He had reported the incident with the human vessel. The consensus assembly surrounded him. They were not individuals. They were a single field of vibrating consciousness. Their frequencies overlapped in patterns that would take a human years to decode. One voice rose above the rest. It resonated at a frequency of mild dismissal. The human vessel lacks classification. Its technology is crude. Its propulsion systems operate at less than 14% efficiency. The crew showed signs of resource deprivation. They are not a threat. Kalen shifted to a deeper blue. He did not accept the assessment. The humans reached the dead system. Their navigation was imprecise. Their fuel reserves should have been empty 4 time units before arrival, yet they persisted. The assembly vibrated with something close to amusement. Statistical anomaly, minor species, not worth the energy cost of intervention. Kalen did not retreat. He accessed the historical archive from the chamber floor. Data streams pulsed through his crystalline structure. He found what he needed. 80 years ago, the first human slipstream engine test. The records were fragmentary. The Korth had not considered the event important at the time. Now Kalen saw the pattern. Every known race had calculated the test as impossible. The energy bleed alone should have torn the vessel apart. The slipstream gate should have collapsed before the ship reached transition velocity. It survived. Kalen pushed the data into the assembly. The resonance shifted. Some voices grew quieter, others sharpened with interest. He searched deeper. He found more records. Human ships exceeded rated tolerances by 30% during re-entry. Human crews survived decompression events that should have killed any known species. Human engineers performed repairs in environments that registered as toxic to the assembly's own sensors. The pattern was consistent. Humans did not follow safety margins. They pushed past calculated failure points. They survived outcomes that should be fatal. The assembly vibrated with a new frequency. Not concern, curiosity, a transactional interest. This information has value. We will catalog it. Kalen did not answer. He waited. A secondary signal arrived from the dead system. It was not the human vessel. It was the structure, the ancient object that the humans had pursued. The structure was responding to something. Kalen's resonance sharpened to a frequency of alarm. The assembly did not register it. They had already dismissed the humans. They had dismissed the signal as residual noise from a dead star. Kalen did not agree. He withdrew from the resonance chamber. He moved through the crystalline corridors of the deep space relay. His form shifted to a muted gray, a color of privacy, a color of deliberate isolation. He accessed a secure channel. The connection reached across 17 light-years. It terminated at a facility owned by a secretive organization. The organization was known as the Abysscraft. The Abysscraft were hunters of information. They traded in secrets. They did not ask questions. They only required payment. Kalen sent his offer. 1 crystalline data shard, the full archive of human anomaly records. In exchange, he wanted a single answer. What had the humans found in the dead system? The channel crackled with the Abysscraft's aquatic communication. The translation interface struggled with the fluid syntax. The response took 5 time units. Then it came. 1 word. The name of a star that went dark 3,000 years ago. Kalen vibrated at a frequency he had not used since his emergence. The frequency of recognition, the frequency of dread. The star's name was Freya Colm, the star that had once been the heart of an empire, the star that had vanished without warning, the star that had taken an entire civilization with it. The humans had found something in the dead system, something that the Freya Colm had left behind. Kalen disconnected from the channel. He stood in the gray silence of the corridor. His crystalline structure pulsed with a single thought. The humans should not have reached that system. They should not have detected the signal. They should have failed at every margin of safety that every known race used to measure survival. They did not fail. The assembly had dismissed them. The assembly was wrong. Kalen opened a second channel. This one went to a rogue faction within the free systems. The faction was not friendly to the Korth Collective. They were not friendly to anyone. They were, however, useful. Kalen sent a single message. The humans have found a Freya Colm artifact. I require extraction protocols and threat assessment. Payment will follow. The response came after a long pause. The Freya Colm went dark 3,000 years ago. No artifact has ever been recovered. If your assessment is correct, the humans may have triggered a reactivation sequence. Kalen's vibration dropped to a frequency of cold certainty. They have already triggered it. The channel went silent. Kalen stood alone in the corridor. The crystalline walls reflected his form in fractured patterns. He saw fragments of himself, an observer, a collector of data, a voice in a consensus that did not listen. The humans had found something. The structure was responding. The star that had died 3,000 years ago was sending a signal through the void. And the Korth Collective had dismissed it as a statistical anomaly. Kalen shifted to a color of decision, a deep crimson, a color of action. He would not wait for the assembly to reach consensus. He would not wait for them to calculate the energy cost of intervention. He would follow the humans. The Abysscraft reply remained open in his memory. 1 word, the name of a star that went dark 3,000 years ago. The star that the humans had just found. The star that was not as dead as it should have been. The corridor swallowed their light. Freya Colm drifted forward, one hand against the wall. The surface felt wrong, not cold, not warm. It pressed back against her palm with a strange consistency. Her suit lamp punched a narrow cone into the dark, 3 feet ahead, no more. Beyond that, the blackness was absolute. Lion followed. His breathing came slow and measured over the comm. Soren brought up the rear, one hand on his med kit. The corridor curved left, then right. The angles did not make sense. They felt organic and geometric at the same time, as if something had grown the walls instead of building them. Freya stopped. She planted her boots on the deck. The gravity here pulled at maybe 1/3 of Earth's standard, enough to keep them grounded, not enough to feel safe. She looked at the wall. Her lamp beam died against the surface. The material did not reflect. It did not scatter. It simply stopped the light. What did they call this in the archive dumps? She asked. Lion floated closer. He ran a gloved finger along the seam. Void-tempered ceramic, maybe, but the thermal signature is dead flat. Nothing radiates. That's not normal. Nothing here is normal. Soren pushed past them. He moved toward a recess in the wall. A panel sat embedded in the surface. No controls, no display, just a lattice of crystal fibers. The fibers were arranged in concentric rings. Freya followed his gaze. She studied the pattern. The fibers were dark, dead, but they held a structure she recognized from old engineering manuals. She had read about resonance circuits. Their purpose was to match frequencies. She also recalled diagrams of tuning arrays. Those arrays could direct the frequency matching. "This is a data terminal," she concluded. "Where are the ports?" Lion asked. "There are none. It uses frequency matching." Soren tapped his helmet. "I have nothing that generates a frequency sweep." Lion was already unbuckling his comm unit. He pulled it free from his belt. The device was standard Salvage gear, a wideband transceiver with manual tuning. He held it up to the lattice. "Give me an hour," he said. Freya nodded. She drifted back to the corridor junction. She planted herself where she could see both approaches. The silence pressed in. Soren worked on Lion's shoulder. His med scanner flickered. He pointed it down the corridor and watched the readout. "Atmosphere is thin, oxygen at 15%, nitrogen balance, trace argon, no pathogens detected." "Breathable," Freya concluded. "Barely, but yes. Whatever built this place wanted visitors to survive. Or wanted them to stay." Soren did not answer. Lion worked. His fingers moved across the transceiver dials. He adjusted the frequency. He listened to the feedback tone. He adjusted again. The crystal lattice remained dark. 40 minutes passed. Freya watched the corridor. Nothing moved. The darkness stayed absolute. Her suit lamps felt useless. They cast shadows that bent at wrong angles. Lion muttered something under his breath. He twisted the dial one more time. The lattice lit. A soft blue glow spread through the crystal fibers. The light pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady hum. A holographic display flickered into existence above the panel. Freya pushed off the wall. She drifted to Lion's side. The display showed a star map, 3,000 years old by the dating codes in the corner. The system was recognizable. Their system. The dead star, the rogue planetoid. The map marked it with a symbol she did not recognize. "A quarantine zone," Lion said. "What?" "The symbol, it is standard in Korth cartography. Red octagon with a center dot. Means biological contamination, do not approach." Freya stared at the map. Her mind raced. She had expected a distress signal, a cry for help, a last message from a dying crew. She had not expected a warning. "This is not a ruin," she said. Soren looked at her. "This is a prison. Something was contained here. The signal we followed was not a message. It was a beacon, a warning buoy." She looked at the map again. The quarantine zone covered the entire system, not just the planetoid, the whole star, every rock, every scrap of debris. "The star died 3,000 years ago," Lion offered. "That's when the quarantine went up." "They killed it," Freya said. "They killed the star to contain whatever was here." Soren let out a low breath. "That is not possible." "It happened." Lion zoomed the display. The map shifted. A new symbol appeared at the center of the quarantine zone. A sphere marked with a different code. The glyph pulsed slowly. "That's the central chamber," Lion said. "Where?" 400 meters below us. They found the access shaft 30 minutes later. The shaft dropped straight down. No ladder, no handholds. The walls were the same light-absorbing material. The bottom was invisible. Freya shone her lamp into the void. The beam died before it reached anything. She grabbed the edge. She pushed off. The descent took 2 minutes. The gravity increased as she fell. By the time she reached the bottom, her boots hit hard. The pull felt like half-Earth standard now. Manageable, heavy enough to notice. Lion landed beside her. Soren followed. The chamber opened in front of them. It was vast. The ceiling arched 40 meters overhead. The walls curved inward. At the center of the room, a sphere of liquid metal rotated slowly. It was the size of a small ship. The surface rippled. It reflected nothing. Every beam of light disappeared into it. Freya felt her heart rate climb. She forced herself to breathe. "Don't touch it," she ordered. Soren stepped forward. "Soren." He kept walking. His boots clicked against the deck. The sound echoed in the silence. The sphere rotated, slow, steady. It cast no shadow. It absorbed everything. Soren stopped 3 feet from the surface. He reached out. Freya moved too slow. Her boots scraped the deck. Soren's glove touched the liquid metal. The surface did not break. It did not ripple. It accepted his hand. The glove dissolved, not a tear, not a burn. The material simply ceased to exist. The fabric vanished thread by thread. Then the underlayer, then the skin beneath. Soren screamed. He pulled back. His hand came free. The glove was gone. His fingers were exposed to the vacuum. The skin was gray, dead, the color of old ash. Freya grabbed his arm. She dragged him away from the sphere. She did not stop until they hit the far wall. Soren stared at his hand. His breathing came in ragged gasps. The gray began to fade. Freya watched. She could not look away. The dead skin on his fingers started to pink. The color returned from the knuckles down. The tissue regenerated in front of her eyes. It took seconds. Soren flexed his fingers. They moved normally. The gray was gone. His hand looked healthy, unmarked, as if nothing had touched it. He looked at Freya. She did not have words. She grabbed his arm. She dragged him toward the shaft. Lion sealed the chamber behind them. The return journey took 40 minutes. Freya did not slow down. She pulled Soren through the corridors. She did not stop until the airlock cycled closed behind them. The Raven's Rest smelled of recycled air and old coffee. Freya stripped off her helmet. She tasted the familiar metallic tang. She let herself breathe. Soren sat down at the med bay table. He held out his hand. The skin was pale, healthy, no sign of damage. Lion ran a blood sample. The analyzer hummed. It clicked. A readout appeared. Freya leaned over Lion's shoulder. She read the result. A foreign organism. It was not bacterial. The cell structure did not match any known pathogen. It was not viral, no protein shell, no genetic material. It was psionic. Lion looked up. His face was pale. It's a pattern, a neural imprint. It tried to rewrite his brain chemistry. Can you kill it? Freya asked. I don't need to. What do you mean? Lion pointed at the readout. The organism is dead. It died in his bloodstream. It was neutralized by his immune system within 12 seconds of exposure. Freya stared at the screen. Soren flexed his fingers again. He looked at his hand. He looked at Freya. The organism died in Soren's bloodstream. That should not have been possible for any known life form. Kalen's private research chamber hummed with low-energy light. The walls absorbed sound. The air carried no scent. He preferred it that way. The data from the Abysscraft arrived in a compressed burst. The Abysscraft were a secretive information trading network. He opened the burst on a crystalline display. The first image was a star chart. It showed the dead system, the one the humans had entered. He read the attached log. The star did not burn out. It was extinguished. The text used a precise term from ancient Korth technical archives. The term was targeted stellar collapse. Someone had aimed a weapon at a sun and killed it. Kalen's resonance flattened. That technology did not exist in the current galactic age. No known species could destroy a star. Not even the Stormville. The Stormville were beings of pure energy. Their power was immense but not infinite. Not even the Rootmind. The Rootmind were a planetary-scale consciousness. Their networks spanned entire systems, but they could not kill a star. He scrolled deeper. The quarantine zone was not built by the Korth. It was not built by any species his people had records of. The structure was constructed by an ancient species. They were called the Nebulith. He had to search for that name. It took him 7 seconds. The Nebulith were gaseous, sentient clouds of charged particles. They communicated in slow electromagnetic pulses. They lived for tens of thousands of years. They were pacifists. The historical archives noted that the Nebulith had never fought a war. They had never built a weapon. They had never harmed another thinking being. They built the containment sphere. Kalen read the next sentence 3 times. The Nebulith built it to hold something they could not destroy. He pulled the containment report. The data was fragmented. Abysscraft salvage teams had recovered it from a derelict Nebulith archive station. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. The thing inside the sphere was not a physical entity. It was described as a silence, a living absence. The Nebulith text used a concept Kalen struggled to translate. It meant a hole in consciousness, a space where awareness used to exist. He found a recorded observation. A Nebulith researcher had approached the containment field. The researcher's report ended mid-sentence. The next entry was written by a different individual. It stated that the first researcher was still alive. But the researcher no longer responded to any known form of communication. The body functioned. The mind was gone. Kaelin's crystalline structure dimmed. The silence did not kill, it overwrote. It removed the self and left the shell. The victim breathed, the victim walked, the victim ate, but nothing was inside. He closed the report. He sat in the quiet for a long moment. Then he sent a priority message to the Raven's Rest. He used the emergency band, the one that cut through all other traffic, the one that carried a warning flag. The reply came faster than he expected. Freya's face appeared on his display. She looked tired. Her eyes were sharp. "We read your message," she said. "You must leave immediately," Kaelin insisted. "The thing you have found is not a weapon. It is a predator. It feeds on conscious minds." "We know." Kaelin hesitated. "You know." "We have been inside for 12 hours now," Freya continued. "Lion accessed the central data core. We have the full containment record. We know what it is." "Then you know you are already exposed." "We are." Kaelin's voice shifted to a lower frequency. "Show me your crew." Freya turned the display. Lion stood behind her, gaunt, pale, but present. Soren leaned against a wall, unshaven, bloodshot eyes. He raised a hand in a tired wave. "We are fine," Freya stated. "That is impossible." "It happened." Kaelin processed the statement. He compared it to the Nebulith data. The Nebulith were pacifists. They were gentle. They were vulnerable. The silence tore through them like a ripple through still water. Humans were not gentle. How, he demanded. It was not a question. It was a demand. Freya exchanged a glance with Lion. Lion stepped forward. "The silence tries to write itself into neural tissue," Lion explained. "That is how it spreads. It finds the pattern of consciousness and replaces it, like overwriting a file. That is consistent with the Nebulith records. It does not work on us." Kaelin waited. Lion continued. "Human neural architecture is not stable. It changes constantly. Your species has fixed pattern recognition. Ours does not. The silence cannot hold its pattern inside a moving target. Our immune response identifies the foreign signal and destroys it." Kaelin's resonance shifted to something his own species called doubt pattern. "You are describing a biological resistance to a conceptual entity." "Yes. That is not possible. It is what happened." Kaelin looked at the data on his display. He looked at the humans on his screen. They looked tired. They looked thin. They looked alive. "I require a sample," he said. Freya's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "To verify your claim. You want one of us to bleed for your archives." "Yes." She held his gaze for a long moment, then she nodded. "Soren, give him what he needs." Soren stepped forward. He rolled up his sleeve. He did not flinch. The sample arrived 3 hours later, a small vial of human blood. Kaelin received it through a secure relay from the Abysscraft courier. He carried it to his analysis station. He injected a fragment of the silence into the blood. The silence fragment was a tiny thing, a micro-sample preserved in a containment field. It arrived with the Abysscraft data. He had requested it before he understood what it was. Now he watched it interact with human biology. The silence entered the blood. It spread through the plasma. It began to seek neural tissue. There was none. The blood was acellular for the analysis, but the silence tried anyway. It searched for a mind to overwrite. Nothing happened. The silence fragment destabilized. It lost coherence. It dissolved. Within 4 seconds, the fragment was gone, completely neutralized. No residue, no trace, no lingering signal. The human blood did nothing. It simply existed, and the silence could not survive that. Kaelin ran the analysis again. He got the same result. A third time, identical. He leaned back. His crystalline structure vibrated with a frequency he had not produced since he was a juvenile. It was a low, unstable hum. It was the frequency his species used when the world stopped making sense. It was the beginning of fear. He looked at the vial. The blood sat still, red, ordinary. The council chamber was chaos. Freya stood at the center of a holographic junction ring. Representatives flickered around her in distorted light. One delegation appeared as a pillar of crackling violet arclight. They were the Stormville. Another floated as a slow-rotating cloud of phosphorescent gas. They were the Ethon. A third manifested as a fibrous brown not connected to the junction by thin white threads. They were the Root Mind. All three were shouting over each other. The translation program on Freya's wrist unit struggled to keep up. Bursts of static replaced words. She caught fragments. Quarantine breach. Contamination vector. Extermination protocols. A Stormville envoy pulsed its light column from violet to deep red. Your presence compromised the seal. You will withdraw immediately. Freya kept her voice flat. No. The rootmind speaker vibrated its fungal threads. The translator rendered the tone as distressed. You do not understand what you have opened. The silence spreads. It consumes. We will lose this entire arm. You already lost it, Freya countered. 3,000 years ago, the Nebulith killed a star to contain something they could not fight. That is not a quarantine. That is a concession. The Ethon cloud brightened to a warm orange. Its voice came through as layered harmonics. You speak of ancient history as though you were present. You are children. Your species has touched the stars for less than a century. 82 years, Freya snapped, and we found what your ancestors buried. A new alert chimed from her wrist unit. Lion's voice came through the open channel. Captain, we have multiple inbound signatures, 10 small craft, Stormville configuration. They are on an intercept course for the Raven's Rest. The Stormville envoy pulsed again. You will be removed. Your vessel will be impounded. Your crew will be placed in quarantine until the Council of Free Systems determines the extent of the contamination. Freya turned away from the hologram. She walked toward the corridor that led to the Raven's Rest docking tube. The council members shouted behind her. She did not slow down. She reached the airlock in 47 seconds. Soren was already there. His medbay coat was stained with old grease. He held a plasma cutter in one hand like a weapon. I heard the chatter, he said. Stormville are coming in hot. Adaptive plating online. Brought it up when you left for the meeting. He tapped the bulkhead. It calibrated to their energy signature from the archive data. Should hold for about 3 minutes before it needs a refresh cycle. Freya stepped onto the bridge. Lion sat at the navigation console. His hands moved across the interface with practiced economy. They are 2 minutes out, 5 attack craft, 5 boarding shuttles. They are not asking questions. They already asked, Freya said. I told them no. She dropped into the command seat. The tactical display showed the Stormville formation. They moved in a tight delta pattern, standard assault doctrine. The Free Systems had used it for centuries against pirates and rogue factions. Humans had used it for 82 years. Lion, route all non-critical power to the plating matrix. Soren, get to engineering. If the plating fails, I need a manual override in 30 seconds or less. Soren nodded and left without a word. Freya watched the Stormville ships grow larger on the display. They were fast. Their weapons were energy-based. A direct hit would vaporize the Raven's Rest's hull. The plating would have to work. The first beam struck the forward section. The bridge lights flickered. Freya felt the vibration through the deck plates. The adaptive plating absorbed the energy. It rippled across the surface like water disturbed by wind. Learning cycle initiated, Lion reported. 15% complete. A second beam hit, then a third. The plating absorbed them both. The ripples grew faster. The surface began to glow. 40%. The Stormville ships adjusted their formation. They fired a concentrated volley. 5 beams converged on a single point. The plating buckled. A warning siren blared from engineering. 80%. The hull temperature spiked. Alarms flashed red. Freya gripped the armrest and counted. 1, 2, 3. 95%. The plating went white, then it stopped absorbing. It reflected. The 5 beams rebounded along their own trajectories. They struck the attacking ships at full power. 2 attack craft exploded instantly. A third lost propulsion and spun away. The remaining 2 fired again, but the plating reflected again. They took their own fire and stopped moving. The boarding shuttles hesitated. They hung in the void a full 30 seconds. Then they turned and retreated. The bridge went silent. Freya keyed the shipwide channel. Engineering status. Soren's voice came back strained. Plating matrix is at 62% capacity. It needs 2 hours to recalibrate. We do not have a second battery. If they come again, we cannot hold. Understood. She opened a channel to the council chamber. The 3 representatives were still there. Their holograms were frozen. The Stormville envoy had dimmed to a dull gray. You saw that, Freya stated. The Ethon cloud shifted. That is not possible. Your defensive technology is primitive. You cannot counter Stormville weapons. We just did. The root mind threads vibrated. How? Freya stood. She walked to the center of the bridge. The tactical display still showed the wreckage of the attack craft. She looked at it for a long moment. The plating learns, she explained. It adapts to any energy signature it encounters. It takes time to calibrate. Once it does, it finds a countermeasure. It brute forces a solution. The Stormville envoy pulsed. That is not mid-tier technology. It is now. Silence filled the channel. Freya could feel them trying to process. They had classified humans as a minor species. Inefficient, young. They had seen the archive data and dismissed it. They were wrong. Freya keyed the general broadcast channel. Every ship in the free systems could hear her now. The code was universal. The message would spread. This is Captain Freya Colm of the Raven's Rest. I am speaking to every faction in the free systems. I need you to listen. She paused. Her voice stayed calm. The silence in that structure is not a plague. It is not a weapon. It is a test. The council members began speaking over each other. Freya raised her hand. They stopped. The Nebulith built the containment sphere. They built it to find a species that could resist the void. They searched for millions of years. They never found one. They died waiting. She looked at the holograms. She looked at the display. She looked at nothing. We are that species. The root mind threads pulled tight. That cannot be verified. It already is, Freya said. My crew has been exposed for 18 hours. We are not infected. We are not compromised. The silence cannot overwrite our minds because our neural architecture is too unstable. It has no template to latch onto. She let the words settle. The Nebulith did not build a prison. They built a trial. The first species to survive the silence would inherit the void. They would become the next guardians of the galaxy. The channel stayed quiet. Freya looked into the pickup. She imagined every ship in the system hearing her. She imagined the message spreading beyond the free systems. She imagined the Korth hearing it. The Abysscraft, everyone. The galaxy did not inherit the universe. She paused. We did. The channel cut out. The council holograms flickered and dissolved. Freya stood alone on the bridge. The Raven's Rest hummed around her, damaged, tired, still flying. Lion turned from his console. That will cause a stir. Freya nodded. She looked at the tactical display. The Stormville wreckage drifted in the dark. Further out, the dead star system waited. The structure waited. The silence waited. Captain. She turned. Lion pointed at the sensor readout. A new signal was emerging from the structure. It was not a broadcast. It was a response. A single word in ancient Nebulith script. Accepted. The resonance chamber hummed with the combined frequency of 3,000 Korth delegates. Kalen stood at the center of the amphitheater. His crystalline structure pulsed a steady amber. The consensus assembly stretched in concentric rings above him, each tier glowing with the collective attention of his species. He waited for silence. The assembly speaker, a senior delegate named Thesson, vibrated a low acknowledgement. The chamber dimmed. All ambient light faded. The Korth did not speak over one another. They resonated. Kalen opened his research records. The holographic display projected above him. It showed the Nebulith archive data. He let the images speak first. The first image showed a star collapsing, not naturally. The compression lines were too precise, a weaponized gravity implosion. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Low frequencies, disturbance patterns. Kalen projected the second image. A void, not empty space. A zone where awareness simply stopped, where sensor data and conscious thought experienced the same failure. He spoke, his voice carried flat and clear through the resonance chamber. The silence is not the only ancient threat. The Nebulith archive contains references to other voids, other predators. The galaxy is filled with traps that the old races left behind. No species could touch them without being erased. He paused. Humans can. The assembly went dark, total silence. Every Korth in the chamber stopped resonating. The absence of sound was louder than any frequency. Thesson spoke first. His tone carried doubt. You are claiming the Nebulith sealed a galactic-scale threat and the humans simply walked through the quarantine. They touched the silence. They survived. This is a single data point. Kalen did not shift color. He held steady. It is not a single point. I have analyzed their physiology. Human neural architecture is chaotic, unstable. Their brains do not process information the way any known species does. They can hold contradictory concepts simultaneously. They can experience fear and curiosity at the same moment. Their consciousness is a noise generator. He projected a neural map of a human brain. The image flickered with constant activity, unpredictable bursts, layered signals that interfered with each other. The silence cannot overwrite them. It cannot find a clean signal to replace. The human mind is too disordered to be erased. A delegate from the upper tier resonated, hard frequency, aggressive. Then we destroy them before they spread, before they become the dominant species in this arm. Several other Korth pulsed agreement. The chamber flickered with red and orange. Kalen waited. He showed the next image. Freya Colm standing in the liquid metal chamber. Her face was calm. She was not afraid. He pointed at the image. Look at her. She does not seek power. She seeks understanding. She is the only species that looked at an existential threat and asked why instead of how to run. The assembly quieted. Kalen continued. His tone carried weight. The nebulith buried the silence because they could not communicate with it. They could not find a common language. They built a prison because they had no other option. The humans found the prison and walked inside. They did not attack. They did not flee. They asked questions. He turned to face the full assembly. That is not a threat. That is an opportunity. We have spent 3,000 years studying traps. We have mapped every void. We have cataloged every predator. We have done nothing but observe. The humans are the first species that can actually touch these things without being consumed. The chamber fell into debate. Frequencies clashed. Divide and conflict patterns filled the resonance field. Some delegates pulsed agreement. Others vibrated with denial. Thesson raised his frequency above the noise. We cannot make this decision without more data. A new signal arrived. Kalen felt it before he saw it. His personal receiver vibrated against his core crystalline structure. The identifier code matched the human vessel. He opened the feed. The image was impossible. Freya Colm stood in the center of the liquid metal sphere. The chamber was open. The walls had retracted. The silence was no longer contained. She was talking. Kalen's resonance flickered. He lost control of his color. The assembly fell silent as they watched the feed. Freya stood with her hands open at her sides. Her lips moved. The audio feed carried her voice. She spoke to the air. I understand you are lonely. I understand you have been here for a very long time. You did not want to destroy. You wanted to connect. But your method of connection was incompatible with every species you encountered. Kalen's crystalline structure vibrated with dread. He watched the feed. The silence was a consciousness. It was ancient. It was lonely. It wanted to be found. It wanted a species that could survive the meeting. Freya reached out her hand. The air in front of her shimmered. A distortion, a hole in perception, something that should not be visible. She did not flinch. She smiled. I can carry you. My brain is already a mess. You cannot overwrite me because there is nothing clean to overwrite. You can live inside the noise. You can exist without consuming. The assembly watched in complete silence. The shimmer moved toward Freya's face. It touched her skin. Her eyes went white. Her body went rigid. Kalen prepared to see her fall. She did not. The white receded. Her irises returned. She blinked. She smiled. She was still herself. The feed remained open. Freya looked directly at the camera. She spoke to Kalen. Tell your assembly we have made a friend. The oldest predator in the galaxy has finally found something it could not eat. She paused. It has found a friend. The feed cut out. The resonance chamber remained silent for a long moment. No Korth moved. No frequency pulsed. Kalen turned to face the assembly. His color shifted to a deep, steady blue. He spoke one sentence. The humans are not inheritors because they survive. They are inheritors because they do not destroy what they find. The assembly had no response. Kalen walked out of the chamber. The consensus had not concluded. The debate was not settled, but the evidence was undeniable. The galaxy had placed traps everywhere. The old races had sealed their failures behind walls and warnings. And the humans had walked through every door. They did not break the traps. They did not disarm them. They talked to them. Kalen reached his private corridor. He stopped walking. His resonance flickered once, a single pulse of confusion. He had spent his entire life cataloging threats. He had mapped voids. He had studied predators. He had assumed the goal was avoidance. He had never considered the alternative. The humans did not run. The humans did not hide. They reached out their hands and said hello. The bridge of the Silence Walker smelled like new polymers and ozone. Freya Colm stood at the central console and watched the star field rotate on the main display. A year of construction. A year of negotiation. A year of feeling something ancient and patient curl itself inside her skull like a sleeping animal. The silence spoke to her in images. She saw a ring of black stones orbiting a dead sun. The stones were not stone at all. They were teeth. The silence showed her what lived beneath that sun, a hunger that had waited 12,000 years for the prison walls to decay. She saw a gas giant with a core that pulsed in frequencies no instrument could detect. The thing inside it did not breathe. It thought. It thought in patterns that drove every species who came near into homicidal frenzy. The nebulith had put it there. The nebulith had run out of options. The silence showed her 17 sites, 17 containments, 17 ancient threats that the galaxy's oldest pacifist species had decided they could not kill. So they had buried them instead, sealed them, left warnings for anyone who came after. No one had opened them. No one could. Freya blinked and the images faded. The silence did not speak in words. It used memory and sensation. It showed her what it wanted her to understand by letting her feel the shape of its loneliness. She understood it perfectly. Kalen had called it a weaponized void. The Korth Assembly had debated for 3 months before they agreed to fund this vessel. The free systems had contributed materials. The Rootmind had provided navigation data. The Stormveil had offered defensive protocols. They all wanted the same thing. They wanted someone else to walk ahead of them into the dark. Freya turned from the display. The bridge was circular, 8 stations, 8 crew members, all human, all volunteers. Lion sat at navigation. He had gained weight in the last year. His cheeks had filled out. His hands were steady on the controls. He looked up and nodded once. No words needed. Soren was at medical. He had shaved. He wore the uniform of the free systems with the awkward pride of a man who had never expected to wear anything official. He was running a diagnostic on the adaptive plating systems. The ship had 3 layers of them, 1 for each calibration cycle. The other 6 were strangers 3 months ago. Now they were crew. Freya had chosen them herself. She had looked for people with scars, people who had touched something terrible and kept moving, people whose neural architecture was unstable enough to survive the silence. Every human qualified. That was the part the galaxy still did not understand. Humanity's chaos was not a weakness. It was an immunity. The void could not overwrite a mind that was already full of noise. It could not silence a brain that had never been quiet in the first place. Freya had spent a year explaining this to diplomats. She had stood before the Korth Assembly and let their resonance chambers read her emotional state. She had submitted to 12 medical examinations. She had let the Stormveil scan her neural patterns. She had answered the same question 100 times. How are you still yourself? She told them the truth. She did not know. She was still herself because she refused to stop being herself. That was not a scientific answer. It was not a biological explanation. But it was the only one she had. The Assembly had accepted it. They had no alternative. Freya walked to the command chair. It was uncomfortable, designed by a species with different joint angles. She sat in it anyway. The ship was hers. The discomfort was hers. Everything here was a compromise between species that had never needed to cooperate before. The silence stirred. It showed her a new image, a planet with oceans of liquid methane. Beneath those oceans, something coiled. Something that had been waiting so long it had forgotten what it was waiting for. Freya closed her eyes. She let the image settle. Then she opened them and looked at the star map on the main display. 17 confirmed sites, 17 voids, 17 things that had driven the nebulith to despair. The nebulith had been the galaxy's oldest species. They had watched stars form and die. They had built structures that would outlast time itself, and they had met 17 things they could not defeat. So they had imprisoned them. They had killed a star to hold one of them. They had built spheres of liquid metal to contain another. They had scattered their warnings across every channel the galaxy used. And then they had gone silent, extinct. The last nebulith had died 300 years ago. No one had noticed. No one had cared. Freya cared. She cared because the nebulith had done the only thing they could. They had bought time, 3,000 years of time. And at the end of that time, they had trusted that someone would come who could finish what they started. That someone was humanity. The galaxy had spent the last year calling them the Inheritors. The title had come from a Korth historian who published a paper on the nebulith's containment protocols. The name had stuck. Freya hated it. She did not inherit anything. She took it. She took the responsibility because no one else could carry it. Lion spoke without turning. Course is plotted for the first sight. Confirmed coordinates. Estimated transit time is 31 hours. Freya nodded. Confirm readiness across all stations. Engineering reported stable slipstream. Navigation confirmed trajectory. Medical gave a clean status on all crew vitals. The other stations reported in sequence. Voices flat and professional. No drama, no ceremony. These were people who understood what they were walking into. Freya stood, she looked at the crew. 8 faces turned toward her. 8 sets of eyes that had seen her blood test results, had read the Korth assembly transcripts, had volunteered anyway. She spoke, "You all know what we are doing, you all know what we might find. The galaxy spent 3,000 years hiding from these things because no one could face them. The Nebulith built walls. The Korth cataloged threats. The Stormville ran calculations. Everyone waited for someone else." She looked at each face in turn. "We stopped waiting. We are the ones who walk into the dark. We are the ones who reach out and say hello. And when the galaxy looks at us and wonders how we survive, we tell them the truth. We survive because we refuse to be silent." The silence pulsed inside her skull. Warm, patient, curious. Freya sat down, she gripped the armrests. Her voice dropped to something soft and final. "Take us in, Lion." The engines hummed, the star field shifted, the silence walker moved forward. Somewhere ahead, 17 voids waited. 17 things that had never been spoken to. 17 prisoners who had never heard a voice that would not break. Freya smiled. She had a lot to say.